Gabriel?
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning, Jim Glenn.
One. There it is. Okay. I think your cat wants to join the meeting, Kristen.
He's already tried a couple of times.
Good morning, Commissioner Worth.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Was that Commissioner Fuentes I heard?
He's just joining now. There he is.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Jim Glenn, good morning.
Muted. I'm talking away, listening to myself. Let me. I thought I'd unmuted it earlier, but let me call to order the November 18, 2021 meeting of the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. And our first item on the agenda is two items: confirmation of the quorum as well as confirmation of public notice.
We do have a quorum and public notice was sent.
Okay, that confirmation. Any requests for public participation?
None has been sent to my knowledge.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the consideration and approval of the minutes of our meeting held on October 21, 2021. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Oh, first of all, are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion.
Okay, look, I guess I see Commissioner Frank Smith moved, and was it Rabbi you second
Yeah,
that?
seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the minutes be approved. All those in favor by saying aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay. Next item is we move directly to sections reports, and the first one is the executive director's report.
Morning, everyone. I welcome to our last meeting of the year. First off, you get a break from us until January, so you're welcome. Quick run through of the past month. For personnel, we are welcoming Andrew Skomorowski.
Very well done. Very bravely done. Lovely.
Yes. Aaron said that Aaron was like, we're going to go by ScoMo. But Andrew is joining us as our new enforcement officer. And he actually jumped into a training yesterday. So we have been, moving forward very quickly on that. And just wanted to welcome him to the team. Also, we have updated our budget and sent the request to Frankfurt. And the way that works is we have to send basically an idea of what we would be asking for with justification, and worked with Brandon to go through historical requests as well as things that we feel like we need to submit and get that finalized and bring an actual printed and digital copy to Frankfurt, which is an interesting process, but that's how it works. And so our total request was an increase that would be, and I said 7, I talked to Brandon and it was actually 8 position increases as a justification. So that would be adding in enforcement, admin, information, and some research components. And looking at the budget, not our budget, but the state budget forecast, there's a little bit of optimism on some type of increase. As we know, that is subject to change, and we won't hold our breath for it, but there is that option to ask. And as I will get to a little bit later, we do have some data to back us up, which I shared with you all. Also, something that we'll come back to is we were able to have our last meeting with the community funds subcommittee to get in a position to have a conversation about adoption and getting that up and running when we get to the committee reports. As far as a staff spotlight, we are doing that this meeting. I did want to show some appreciation for Chad Stratton. You all have noticed and commented on the dropping case age, and that goes as a big, really that's a team effort with all of enforcement, with Aaron's leadership, with Colt being able to help get some of these things, getting us a direction and being able to come to a conclusion that we probably should close or getting a next direction. But Chad has been very thorough in bringing these older cases and having these conversations around next steps and making decisions. And so really appreciative for that extra work. And then also wanted to add Brandon for all the extra hours that were needed to get that budget piece completed and then to drive it to Frankfurt. It's a really arduous process, and Brandon did a good job, and we were able to have quite a few meetings on it and working through all the historical information, getting the narratives. Everyone, Marianne and Aaron, put in all the information that was needed for their respective units to make those asks. And so it's a big team effort to get that completed. And then Brandon had to compile it all. And so that was a really hard task, and really appreciative for getting that done. I mentioned the training yesterday was some fair housing training that we took part of. And there's also, by the time we come back, there will have been an intake training with HUD for a lot of us in December. And there's still the planning with EEOC on a mediation training with Indiana. And I'll be sitting in on that, as well as Kristen. And then something that I learned last week through my weekly meetings with our HUD monitor is we will be getting updated conciliation guidance to conform to some of HUD's focus on public interest in the conciliation agreements, and how we can better align with HUD on what they want to do as far as public interest components of conciliation agreements. As far as outreach, as always, a lot of it will be covered in education and outreach, but I did want to follow up on something I've been mentioning. I had my meeting with the mayor of Georgetown and their new commission that it was established a while back, but the appointment process has gone longer because there was a little bit of confusion with the scope of work that they would be doing, because they were created when after the fairness ordinance passed in Georgetown. And so that's their specific focus. However, I will be working with the mayor and the city attorney on their application portal. We finished that yesterday, so it's up and running on a more clarified application portal for interested commissioners to put their names in. They have 2 appointments already, and they're looking to finish the final 3 by the end of the year to start operations in January. And so I'll be working with them through December to get that started. And then they also relayed to me that they would be happy to have any of you meet with and talk to their new commissioners once they get them appointed and ready to go. So that's something I'll follow up on as soon as they are done with those appointments, and then we can set that up. as far as the tech update, Commissioner Rabbi saw this, but we got new printers and copiers. The old ones that we had were not very great and they were always down or something was wrong. And these are much newer. The functionality is improved. Commissioner Rabbi said that you should be able to talk to them and make them print, which is maybe a possibility. I don't know. But the reliability is important. And there are 2 on the 14th floor. And then another one is on back order that we will get whenever that's done. Other updates, just as a follow-up to something we talked about at the last meeting and my conversation or my presentation with the legislature on getting data on what are some of the other protected classes and what are some of the budgets look like for other state agencies. And thanks to Kristen and Summer and Courtney, who was one of our legal externs, we were able to put together a fun data map where you could scroll over the states to see what classes are protected in those different states. The timing was great. Courtney, the student, was able to get some of the laws on it, and it happened to coincide with Kristen finishing part of her MBA program and learning how to use Tableau software. And so combine those 2 things to make a nice little map. And I also worked with the state to put that map up on our website. And so anyone who goes to the About Us on the KCHR website can see our protected classes as well as protected classes across the country. And the idea with that is we can see trends, which also can build support for in the future when we ask to have any type of expansion of our own protected classes, to be able to show these, especially in states that are around us and similar to us, these are things that are protected in these other states. And so having that just as a data point that you can look at is really nice. I didn't see that on any other state agency's website. So I think that's an interesting way to do it. We also are working on a similar map with budgets. I shared with you that map through an email that showed the budgets for the similar state agencies across the country, save for those few states that don't have an agency. Hopefully we never go in that direction, but it was very apparent that a lot of our budget is not nearly as robust as other states. And so that also increases our justification for asking for more, being able to show how relative to population, we are much lower funded. And so we should be able to ask for more to be in line with the rest of the country. And that is being shared with our General Assembly, especially those budget committee members who asked me for that information. And I'm sharing that with them in order to back up our request for an increase in funding. I mentioned those old documents and photos that we found, and just to let you all know, we're going to put together a book and get them scanned digitally to add to our website as a historical look at the agency and what we've done, as well as some of them are going to be framed and displayed in the office, making sure that we preserve them the way that they should be. And so that's something that I think will be a nice project for December. I mentioned that Unity Breakfast in Hopkinsville, which was a great event. It was very well attended. It was kind of, it was interesting to have the night before, they told me that it was not only sold out of the 750 seats, but they also had an overflow crowd that was coming in. So that was kind of nerve-wracking at first to speak or keynote to a sold out crowd. It was such a great event, and just the people who were there and the awards that were given out for people's work in the community on unity and diversity. it was great to hear some of the things that are going on. And I was asked to come back for 3 more events. So I'll let you all know on those. And then I also included links to some of the coverage of that breakfast and my speech. And then my last thing before you have to listen to me again later is on top of the annual report that we would put together, I just wanted to share with each of you that I personally wanted to put together plans and goals for the next year that I would want to go through in one of our next meetings, and just really building out our vision for the work that we want to do, especially some of the things that we want to do differently and to do more of, and just ways that we can help more. And so what I wanted to ask of each of you is, in that time, I know I said you're getting a break from me, but in that time before our next meeting, if there's something that you want to see in the new year that you want us to start doing, or things, just ideas that you have, please reach out to me so we can talk about it and put it into that plan. Basically like a strategic plan, but I just want to know what you all hope for and what you want to see, and talk about ways that we can make that happen. And I know Commissioner Rabbi mentioned one to me yesterday about something he wanted to do. And so just in that spirit, just please let me know some things that you hope to see, and or that you think it would be nice for the commission to start doing, and then we can work that into a plan. Any questions?
Any questions from any of the commissioners relating to the executive director and his report? Okay, hearing none. Thank you for that, Terrence. It seems to have been a very busy month, which is really good. And in regards to the strategic plan, I encourage everybody, if you got ideas or suggestions for what you'd like to see going forward, just please get those in, because it's very, very important to have your input so you have shaped the direction in which we're going. So again, Terrence, thanks for your report. Next is the budget and personnel report from Brandon.
Yes, as Terrence said, we did get our budget plan submitted for the 2023-2024 biennium budget. You have my report before you. If you have any questions, I'll field those at this time.
Any questions on the financial report? Okay, hearing none. Thanks for that, Brandon, and thanks for your work in terms of getting the budget request in, because that's very, very important. And hopefully, with what we provide, be in a position where we actually get some more fundings to fulfill the mission that is leased in the statute, and look forward to some expansion in the future. Next on the agenda is the enforcement unit report. Aaron.
Hello, everyone. You all have all the cases in my report before you. We have, we have 2 administrative closures on the agenda. We have 10 no probable cause cases, 3 cases that are withdrawal without settlement, and 3 cases that are withdrawal with settlement. If y'all have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions from any of the commissioners on any of the cases that are before us today for approval? Okay, hearing none, I want to take this approval in a 2-step process. First is to approve all of the cases except 1211 PA, which is the Atkins versus Jewish Hospital Shelbyville. And the reason for that is that Jewish Hospital Shelbyville is associated with U of L Health. U of L Health is associated with University of Louisville, and I am a board of trustee member at the University of Louisville, so that one's separate. So could I have a motion to approve all of the cases in the action except for 1211 PA?
I would like to make a motion to approve. This is Doris.
Dr. Sar has moved. Is there a second?
Jim Glenn, second.
Okay. It's been moved and second that all of the cases except 1211 PA be approved by the commission. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand so I can see you. Okay. That is now approved. The next one is, can I have a motion to approve 1211 PA with a note that I'm not participating in the I'm abstaining from voting on that case. So can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Smith. Is there a second?
Second from Commissioner Sar.
I think I saw Commissioner Worth first. So that's been moved and second. All those in favor of the approval of a 1211 PA with the noted extent of abstention, raise your hand or say aye. Okay. So the motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks you. Thank you all for that. Next on the agenda is the Education and Outreach Unit report from Mary Ann Taylor.
Good morning, commissioners. This is Juan Peña. I'm the Human Rights Specialist for the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. Ms. Marian Taylor, our Supervisor for Education Outreach Unit, could not attend the meeting, so she asked me to give her report. I believe that you have her report. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer. If I don't have the answers, I will just take notes and refer to her. Yes.
I want to say thank you again for what you're doing. I appreciate the really hard job that you have been doing through all these years. Thank you for serving our community and doing this excellent job. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Fuentes. Your support has been vital to our education outreach efforts. In fact, we're doing a series of workshops starting December the 7th. Targeting to the Spanish-speaking population, and we will need your help to help us reach out to the community. So and we are grateful for the support of all the commissioners.
Any additional questions or comments relating to the Education and Outreach Unit report? Okay, hearing none. Next is the report of the legal unit, Colt.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to take any questions about the legal unit report. Thank you.
Okay, it concludes the various staff reports. We now move to committee reports, and we're going to talk about Community Foundation discussion. And I assume Commissioner Worth, are you going to lead this, or Terrence, which one?
Terrence, do you want to take the lead? I'll chime in as necessary. How do you want to do it?
Sure. He guilted me into it at our meeting. So Brandon, I want to make me host so I could share.
You're the host.
All right, perfect. Okay, so can everyone see the presentation?
Can you put it in presentation mode?
Huh. That's what I was wondering, because it is on my end. Let's see. What do you see right now?
See I guess the first page and all of the other pages at the bottom instead of it's just seems to be in presentation mode. Now it is.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So today, what we wanted to go through was just talking about an update on the community foundation model and some clarifications on what that looks like and the overview of what our options are right now. And then any questions that you all had about the selection of how this works. And so as a refresher, we brought this up a few meetings ago, and Chair Burse designated a subcommittee to work through the nuts and bolts of what we, especially addressing some of the questions that you all had presented at the initial meeting, to work through our options and how we could design this to benefit the commission. And so that's what we've been doing over the past few months. So just a reiteration of why is the commission functions are vital to what we want to do. Being able to adequately address complaints, but also do more in educating and preventing some of the things that we see and doing work in the community across the state, having more agency in doing that. And recent changes, I say recent, but it was 2015, changes in KRS allowed for more flexibility for agencies to raise money. And there's agency work that's needed right now. And I specifically mentioned KRS 344-190, which talks about the additional powers and duties of the commission. There are so many tools in our toolbox that we don't use because we don't have the resources. Commissioning these studies and reports, assigning statewide work groups and facilitations that we are by law supposed to be doing, that we haven't been able to do because we don't have the resources. So being able to do those things and affording us the opportunity to really expand on the work that we're doing to get back to what it was when this office was more fully funded. So that's the why. I did want to go through some clarifications that came up in these subcommittee meetings. One of the things that we talked about was not commingling funds. The options that we would be looking at would, instead of us transferring money into an account to then grow and have other monies added and invested, we would not put in a cent. I didn't, and the subcommittee agreed, didn't think that it would be, it seemed much cleaner and a better delineation of state and foundation to allow for the way this would work is basically the account would be opened and then the fundraising would begin, as opposed to putting in startup money. So it will take longer. What this is signing off on the kickoff and the ability to do this. And so once we are signed off, we are able to use their marketing and fundraising at no cost to us and at no cost to any state funds. But once we have that signature, we're able to use their resources to then raise a certain amount of money. And once that threshold is met, the account is open and active, which then can begin investing and doing all of that. But there's no commingling of funds and we don't have to contribute anything. Just wanted to get that clarification back on the record. And so here's an overview after conversations of what it would look like and some of the provisions. So the name, just the Kentucky Human Rights Fund, being not having the same name as the commission, but just having that fund exist. And the purpose would be for the advancement of the mission of KCHR. And the purpose is broad intentionally for the types of donations and things that come in instead of being completely specified to one particular function or action, just for the advancement of the mission, gives us a little more flexibility on how to use whatever funds are provided. And then one of the options that we talked about was picking the option that gave us untied or unbound distribution periods. And what that means is if there were something that we were wanting to do and we needed to tap into those resources for that activity, we could authorize that distribution into our newly created account, which Brandon we've already discussed, is ready to begin opening. But at any time that we wanted to do that, as opposed to another model where it would be yearly or biannually. But this would be the option to sign off on a transfer at a specified period. And the advisors for this distribution or transfer would be the executive director and the commission chair. And that would be dual authorization at all times. And so it's not one person says we're going to make this transfer. It would be a dual authorization where both signatures would be needed for any disbursement or distribution within that fund. One thing that we talked about is also adding a provision to do a KCHR review after year 3, to look at what we would, if there are things we wanted to change, if we wanted to cease, if there were concerns or whatever, to make sure that we have it in there that we're going to have a complete review and discussion after year 3. And that's on top of, there will be yearly audits and yearly reviews, but that's just on top of that, to have a reconsideration just to look at where we are and if there's something that we wanted to adjust or modify or completely cease. And 3 years was the time because that allows for fundraising and investment. The first year, as I explained, since we're not contributing directly, there would need to be time to raise the money to start the fund, and then maybe a year of the fundraising money, and then a year of action. And so the third year should be when you could really check and see kind of where you sit. And so that's why that 3-year agreement review was included in the conversation. The biggest portion of our conversation, those, and we'll circle back, but those were the provisions that were easily agreed upon. They were based on the questions that you all presented in our first meeting on this. But the biggest portion of the conversation was around what type of investment would that fund do? The options presented, as you can see, there were quite a few. And in conversation, the two that rose to the top were the growth option and the balanced option. And each of them has their merits of why we would want to go that direction, but this was the biggest part of what we would want to discuss on how we would direct any of that action. And so I'll share a brief piece, and then I would like for Commissioner Worth to share his thoughts on this, because his involvement with other foundations really drove this conversation and where we ultimately went with the subcommittee. But it's still up to all of you, just at their guidance. And so the crux of it was, one option had a little bit more fixed income that stayed at 40% imbalanced, and then the rest was invested a little bit more conservatively, not as conservative as one of the other options that I was a fan of, but was talked out of. But these two, one would be 40% of income that stays, and the rest is invested in different ways. The growth option, there's less income or fixed income that stays, but there's more investment, more growth opportunity. And so this was the conversation that we had for a while. And Commissioner Worth, if you wanted to talk a little bit about your perspective on this and really how you guided the group to that choice or that first selection, and then we can talk about where we are with that.
Terrence, thank you for putting this PowerPoint together. You are much more technically gifted than I am, so I appreciate you putting this information together for the commissioners. So Children's Home of Northern Kentucky has been in the business of having relationships with community foundations for multiple years at this point. So our two biggest partners are the Community Foundation of Greater Cincinnati Foundation, and then the Horizon Community Funds here in Covington for Northern Kentucky. And I work with a very conservative board here at Children's Home of Northern Kentucky, just so that you know that piece of the equation here. And yet our board members, when looking at all of the options that Terrence is outlining here with community funds, Horizons Community Funds specifically, our board, after much discussion, decided to go towards the growth portfolio. I know that has more risk, but let me just share with you why I think that's the right place for us to be. If we use some of the other options with Horizons Community Funds, it basically acts as a stagnant savings account. And I'm not sure that that's what our goal is. If I keep on going back to what's the original goal here, the goal was to attract new stakeholders and new donors who had an interest in the mission of the Kentucky Human Rights Commission and who would help financially support some of that strategic plan that Terrence and the rest of us commissioners are going to be putting together here shortly. And so if our goal is to expand the margins and to take some calculated risk and to get the needed funds in the door that we need, I'm not sure that the other options from Horizons is really going to lead us anywhere. Like I said, it's going to act like putting our money in a coffee can and burying it in the backyard. It's going to be safe. It's just not going to be working for us. So Children's Home of Northern Kentucky has opted for option one with our relationship with Horizons Community Funds. And I'll just say, Horizons and Greater Cincinnati Foundations is just one part of the puzzle when it comes to our investment holdings. We have been blessed with some donors who have given us some funds to be endowed. And we have those all in the same kind of growth portfolio plan that Horizons is offering. And if we had not done that, we would have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. The market has, yes, it can go up and down, but it has had some very healthy responses over this past, the last 2 fiscal years. And so that's my experience. I know it's limited experience. I certainly welcome the input of the other commissioners. I think a key driving force, another reason why I'm trying to advocate for the growth portfolio option one with Horizons Community Foundation, is because we are not putting in any of the bread and butter money. This is not our grocery money, right? As Terrence said, these funds are going to be raised separately. They're not going to be commingled with any operating funds. So I'm a little more risk tolerant noting that piece of the equation. I hope that helps, Terrence. I hope that helps, Chair.
I thought it was helpful, especially the part where you almost called me Clarence. That's great.
Sorry, sorry.
But no, I think that was a good summation of the conversation around the different options. And so really, where that goes with this conversation then is opening it up to all of you now to discuss agreement on those provisions in the overview, name, purpose, distribution, schedule, and signatories, and then that choice of investment strategy. I will say, I was, when we were talking about it, I was very much on the conservative portfolio train and was quickly shut down with the argument of the money in a coffee can. And so I appreciated that perspective on how we would approach this. And so with that, I will shut up and for any questions and discussion of provisions and choices.
Okay, given the presentation, what questions do the commissioners have regarding this? And I guess I started at a threshold level is number one. I think before we jump to agreement on provisions and the choice of investment strategy is the threshold question of whether we should do this. It'll be interesting to hear commissioners' thoughts on that.
I think that this is certainly a good venture to look into, and being able to learn this, our budget needs, the things that we are trying to position the commission to do. I do know that previously there was some attempt with this commission to have some other funding mechanism in place. And I think the concern that I would have is making sure this time what we're doing outlives the transition of commissioners, and that we are able to build a sense of trust given the previous dialogue and concerns of the commission itself. And we are freshly kind of moving from that era, moving into this. So I hope that we could even be able to identify as we set things in place, if that is our decision to do so, how it differs from previous attempts and how more safeguards, more perpetuity, et cetera, is in place for this, because I think it is a tremendous opportunity.
And for people who are newer and don't necessarily know the background, the previous attempt at raising funds was around a specific event, and they created an actual foundation, which is different than creating a fund. That was with that in mind, making sure to add a lot more safeguards. This approach allows it to be completely blind, and that should have gone on this overview slide, but it's completely blind as to donors, and it's completely blind as to who does what. So that way there's no, to defeat the idea of any type of conflict, being able to not see who has donated to that fund. And the one thing that's important to note is donors could designate whatever they have to go to this fund, or someone could be a general donor to that community foundation, and a portion of it could go into this fund. And so that creates multiple avenues for donation, but also really keeps it blind. And as far as the perpetuity, that's why the purpose would be for advancement of the mission, because the mission should only expand, it should never end, as opposed to something that's created around an event or something like that. The purpose is something that would last in perpetuity, and the advisors for any change would be positional and not name-based. And so that also adds to the perpetuity nature of it, as opposed to an individual foundation where you would name individuals to do certain actions, name a board, all of that. This is built for longevity and to address some of those concerns that you raised.
Other questions and comments?
Commissioner Chair Burse, I have just one additional comment, if that's okay.
It's fine, proceed.
I would just like to say, I would like to piggyback on what Commissioner Smith was saying, that this is an incredible opportunity for us. I never really personally I never had much energy, to tell you the truth, around getting in relationships with the local foundations, the community foundations for Children's Home of Northern Kentucky. It didn't feel like a burning priority. I couldn't have been more wrong about that. There has been, with minimal effort, Children's Home of Northern Kentucky, with these community foundations, we now have $1 million of endowed funds that I literally had to do very little to get. And it's money being thrown at us. Now, granted, we can't, because it's an endowment, we can't use all of it, but we do get an annual distribution. In the chat box, everyone, in case you want to know why I think, or why I agree with Commissioner Smith that this is such an opportune time, a big reason for that is the Endow Kentucky tax credit. So the Commonwealth has been setting apart, about $1 million a year to high net worth individuals who want to shield some of their income from taxes. And so they can get a state tax credit that's good up for 5 years. So if they owe any state taxes, they have this fund that they can contribute to. The deal is it has to be an endowment, which is what we're doing. And it's $1 million that's available. And everyone that I have talked to, every high net worth individual that I know that contributes to this, those dollars go very quickly. People are standing in line to get those tax credits. And so a married couple can get $50,000 each, $100,000, and they have that as a credit for the next 5 years. So it's really good for high net worth individuals around the Commonwealth. And it's also good for not-for-profits. So if you want to take a little more look about that information, I've sent you a link to the state webpage that explains Endow Kentucky tax credit. It's just another reason why I think the timing is right.
And just to piggyback on the timing, one thing that we discussed in the subcommittee was the timing of doing this, because once we agree and sign, that day they can open the initial piece where people can donate. And this season, we're still in the giving season. And so that could help with getting that initial that initial donor base, because we have holiday giving and end of year tax giving. And so being able to take advantage of that enables us to really skip ahead in the line a little bit on people who might be looking for somewhere to give before the end of the year while they're in the giving spirit. And so being able to do that was also a consideration in our discussion.
You know, in regards to your time, the Endow Kentucky tax credits are available at the beginning of the fiscal year, and usually community foundation organizations drive people doing those. So you have to have your application in as early as possible on July 1, which is the beginning of the state's fiscal year. And as Commissioner Worth said, those tax credits usually go pretty quick. So say that the Endow Kentucky tax credit wouldn't help us in terms of fundraising through the end of this calendar year.
Right.
But we would be well situated for the next round.
Other questions, comments? No other questions or comments from anyone? Take your presentation down, Terrence, so I can see people. Okay. Any other questions or comments in regards to any of that you've heard? And I guess I would ask, if there are no other comments, what's your pleasure in regards to moving forward?
Just one last comment, Chair. I think there is some tie-in with some of our discussions today. Obviously, if we have any luck in expanding the protected classes that Terrence talked about during his presentation, obviously there becomes a wider spread of interest in supporting this kind of community fund. So I hope that we might be able later on, when we're doing our strategy, to think about the fact that the more populations that have protected class status, the more interested a wider swath of donors may be in supporting this kind of endeavor.
Okay, thank you for that.
I guess, Chair Burris, we probably, I don't know if there's any reluctance of anyone that would say, do we need more time to consider this? But if there is none, then given what our executive director has said about getting something in place and immediately being able to proceed with some connections prior to the end of the calendar year for giving opportunities, maybe it would be advantageous for us to move forward. But I think we did talk about also, Executive Director, that there would be an evaluation. I believe we said 3 years. There would be an evaluation of this entire arrangement and process, so that we have an opportunity to take another look at how effective this is, how the money in the first option is doing, given the economy, relationship with the vendor, etc. So we would not let this just be on autopilot, but it would indeed have some evaluation process.
That's correct. It was 3 years on top of yearly reviews and the yearly audits that are conducted.
Any other inputs or comments? Let me just pose 2 questions to you in a way of getting there. Is one is the question, should we do this? So that from Commissioner, and then the second part or a part B to that is, if so, how do we proceed? So hearing none, I would hearing no anyone's voicing any objection to that in terms of should we proceed, I will take it that the consensus is that we ought to do this. And then the second part of that was, if we're there, how do we proceed in terms of going forward? Because I think there's some additional work that has to be done in terms around guidelines, process, and structure that should be. And then with the community foundation, there are agreements and that have to be entered into and signed off on in terms of how those funds will operate within the community foundation itself. And then I think another question to that is, there are community foundations all over the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Are we talking about starting with a particular 1 or 2 in terms of where we are?
So to answer that last question, the thought was to start with this one, and the reason, or to start with one, and the reasoning is identifying other community foundations that can have the same provisions that we agree to. That way we can use the same format or playbook for different foundations. And so once we have if we're agreed on the provisions, which were on the overview section, plus the investment idea or option, being able to use that as the template for whatever other ones do come up. We've had conversations with 2 community foundations, one of which the distribution periods are different, and we would have to discuss a different option on how that would be orchestrated as far as process. And so that would be a different, that would be something I would want to bring back up if we were starting to enter into an agreement with one of those that had a different setup in that way. So the overall concept is to do community foundations that allow for this type of these provisions that we agree to, which these are all of the things that are in that agreement that was the draft agreement for the community foundation. These were the provisions that were left open for determination by us on setup and process. And so that was why those were the ones that were presented. And then in the future, we would want to work with others who allow for those same provisions. And if not, then we would have to have a separate conversation about the different provisions for that specific foundation. Was that question for me, Vice Chair?
Yes, it sounds like we are able to take the tenets of the overview as you have presented it for presentation purposes and transform them, maybe Chair, into a policy statement for the commission, so that it is vetted. Again, should there need to be an entry into a different community foundation to start, we have it template. We have the template, but it's actually a policy that the commissioners have, agreed to. So we would not be rethinking this, but it's something that would hold its test of time, and possibly amendments could be made, but at least it's, I guess, Chair, I'm thinking, as to your question, given the nature of this and given whatever scrutiny that our general public could have, is there a process that we should formalize as commissioners, so that the tenets of the overview that were up on the screen, the purpose, the et cetera, the name, is a policy.
Yeah, I guess that's in accord with my thinking in terms of where we are and what, at least in terms from a process standpoint, where we should be. One other sort of check the box is I guess in terms of us, I do not know of many other state agencies, which we are a state agency, are doing this. And the question is, should we also give a heads up to our liaison in the governor's office in terms of what we're doing, to see what the reaction and feedback would be?
I would agree with that statement. This
Yes.
is Jim Glenn. Pass it on to the governor's office and get a reaction from them.
Yeah. So to move this forward, and I'm struggling with exactly how to do it. I think one, taking the overview presentation as Frank has suggested, or Commissioner Smith has suggested, and putting it in a policy format as a document for adoption by this body, I think would be in order. This and then getting that feedback from the governor's office in terms of reaction prior to proceeding. I guess pending those two items, I'm personally, I'm inclined to agree. I think this organization needs a lot more resources, that it can be a lot more effective than it's currently being. But you need those resources there, and we have to figure out how to get them. And this is one way of being able to do that. So if I can frame this in the terms of saying that, one, we need that subject to development of a policy document acceptable to the commission with input or reaction from the governor's office, that we are inclined to proceed. And I guess, having said that, is there any objection to that, or do we need to put that formally in a motion to move forward? I need to hear from you, commissioners.
I think you know where I stand, Chair Burse. And just, I think here's another quick answer to the question that you posed. There are other community foundations across the Commonwealth, certainly. However, here's what we found, that Horizons Community Fund in Northern Kentucky had some more exciting flexibility about how the accounts could be structured. That's not true with some of the other foundations throughout the Commonwealth. And the other piece that I think is really important for us, as once again, I keep going back to our goal, and our goal is to gather more funds so we can do more things strategically. Not all community funds had the same apparatus in place to promote the various accounts that were being held in their community funds. So some of them had done a better job in terms of their web presence, their print magazine presence. that went out to all of their members. And one of the things that when Terrence and I met with Nancy Grayson of Horizons Community Funds, one of the pivotal questions we asked her was, what is Horizons Community Fund going to be doing to promote the work of the Kentucky Human Rights Commission? So in my limited experience with the three community foundations I'm working with right now, they are top notch in terms of promotion. So I hope that answers that one piece about why Horizons, why are we starting with them?
Having heard the discussion, is there a motion by any commissioner as it relates to?
Chair, we do have a couple of questions in the chat. There is a particular comment rather from Commissioner Karama concerning the Bluegrass Community Foundation as an option, and then the notion of, is this a vote for today versus maybe after the holiday? We don't meet until January. The silence is deafening. And I see that we have I think we have 8 of our 11 commissioners.
Yes, it's
present.
8 by my count.
And so that this is of such that I know that the committee has worked on this, and we see some things and the timeliness of seizing upon the end of this year and getting engaged as our executive director. I'm in support of that, but I do want to think through or allow, maybe Chair, if we could hear from Commissioner Karama and also Dr. Starr. Have any comments?
I don't, other than obviously I support this. I think this is going to be great. I just thought that maybe when we were thinking about different foundations, I know the Bluegrass Community Foundation has a lot of freedom to do some different things. I know they recently started an initiative and created a separate foundation for Black leaders within the community, nonprofit directors, building capacity of other minority run businesses. And so I just thought that might be a good foundation to kind of explore and see what other type of things, they're willing to support in regards to this conversation.
And that was actually on the list of, once we have the parameters and get going, to be able to work with other foundations or community foundations to use. And that's what I was getting to on the community foundations that allow us to use that same overview setup that we agree to be able to use those with other ones. And so once we have it down, to then be able to approach other community foundations and say, this is the format that we can do. Are you able to do this in this manner? And then working with them to establish some type of relationship. That was actually I think they were third on the list of people to work with. So that was definitely a group to add in once we get our structure agreed upon and have our wheels a little bit going. And the only reason we had talked about doing this other one first is, as Commissioner Worth was kind of talking through, they are newer and have this setup that works a little bit more in our favor. They have the ability for us to start a foundation without committing some of our money, which other places don't have that type of setup. And so basically having one to feed the other makes sense. So if we did go with a community foundation in the future that did need some type of initial investment, we could then discuss a transfer from one to help start up another. But that way we're still not commingling any state funds to enter into an agreement or to start. So that's why it makes sense to start with one that allows us the opportunity to work through getting started without committing our own already limited resources.
And just by way of additional research, I also spoke with the Central Kentucky Foundation based out of Elizabethtown. So they would be another candidate if we were able to get this baby off the ground and flying. So there are multiple community foundations that we could have relationships with. It's just as Terrence was saying, the Horizons group had the most flexibility, and quite truthfully, they're younger and hungrier and scrappier to get some major accounts moving in the right direction. So
Yes, another thought that came to me by mentioning different communities would then be making sure we are not intrusive in any way to local commissions and whatever their needs might be, that we could ensure that our mission would be inclusive of the support of human rights throughout the entire state, and that we could work in collaboration as needed on some issues identified by other local commissions. So I would hope that, I guess for me, the more we move into it, it's sounding like if we got to start, that we would, as a committee perhaps of the commissioners, if we would continue to monitor and make amendments as we go, as we discover best practices, other thoughts that, I think the key in the policy statement would be identifying how it's managed and to what degree it's managed by the entire group of commissioners, so that, everyone is able to understand what's happening, and it's always nothing is concerning.
As I've listened to it and all that, and I understand some desire to have something in place to take advantage of year-end giving. I still detect not an overwhelming support to jump into it right now, but wanting to do it, but to do it in a planned, thoughtful process around policy development and guidelines in terms of what we do and how we do it. I understand we've been given a PowerPoint today with some points on it, but in terms of a document, a policy document that can live, I guess, forever, that any commissioners coming forward picks that up and understand fully and completely what we're doing. We probably, at least unless you as a majority disagree, need to have that document in our hand in advance to make a decision in terms of going forward and how we do it. I think the consensus is we want to do this, but we want to do it in a planned, thoughtful process, making certain that we cross all I's and dot all T's.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree too. I think if this is done right, I think this is something, we want to last long after we are no longer, a part of this body. And so I think, doing it right
is the way to go. So I agree with you, sir.
So what I think to Commissioner Worth and to Terrence, I think what would like to see to have move us forward, and I understand we won't get to see it until January, is development of a policy document for this program, but also bring back the agreement with the Horizon Foundation so that we understand what that structure is. And then the third piece is, of course, touching base with the governor's office to make certain there are no objections there in terms of going forward. And I think that's where we are, if as best I can determine from your silence and the questions that have been asked. Any objection to proceed in that way from anyone? Okay. Hearing none. So let's proceed that way. And let me thank Terrence and Commissioner Worth and the members of that committee for your work in terms of what you're doing. We're moving in the right direction, and it really feels good based on what I received in January of this year and where I am in November of this year. This commission is moving forward, and it's good, doing good work, and it's because of all of you individuals who are committed and involved. So we'll proceed with that. That's that committee report. Next item on the agenda is new business, and I think there's a single item listed there, Terrence, relating to implicit bias training.
Yes, and that would be Commissioner Worth. If you wanted to share your thoughts that you raised last week about options for implicit bias training.
Chair Burris, I don't know if there's any interest in this. This is just an offer, but I've worked with Ed Palmer for several years here at Children's Home of Northern Kentucky with our public school district partners, other community partners, law enforcement on implicit bias training, specifically around the topics of the disproportionate number of persons of color represented in homeless youth shelters, in out-of-home care with the Department of Community-Based Services, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. And our 120 employees continuously give him very high marks on his implicit bias training. I was just curious if you or the commissioners would ever like to consider a meeting here in Northern Kentucky. I know it's a far drive for some of the commissioners, but I would just like to throw out the idea that we could have a meeting here in our event center in DeVue Park at our main campus of Children's Home of Northern Kentucky, and possibly have Ed Palmer spend some time with the commissioners, especially given the amount of new commissioners on the team around the topic of implicit bias and how it can affect state systems such as the out-of-home care system in Kentucky. The cabinet spends millions upon millions of dollars in providing care for kids in out-of-home care. There are numbers suggesting that persons of color don't enjoy the same positive discharge rates in this system compared to their counterparts. I just thought that maybe it would be a moment for us to renew our energies to once again understand why we're doing what we're doing on this commission and listening to this incredible speaker. I know that there may not be funds for this, and so I was going to offer that Children's Home of Northern Kentucky would pick up the stipend and the cost associated with this event if there would be any interest. So there's the offer. He's coming in next week to do a training with all of our 120 staff members, our junior board, our subject matter experts, and our trustees here at CH&K Behavioral Health. And it got me wondering if you good folks would like to take advantage of something similar. So there's the offer.
I appreciate the offer, and it's two offers there. One is to hold a meeting at your facility in Northern Kentucky, which I think we've said before we would like to do when we start back meeting in person. And then the second is to have that as part of the meeting that day, a presentation in that regards to it. So I'm inclined to work towards when we get back in person, having a meeting in Northern Kentucky, and we'll do that. And then we can work around what the meeting and program will be like on that day when we're there. So I'm inclined to do that. So thank you for that. And, along those same lines in terms of subject matter areas, as commissioners who were, I guess, old, that been on here longer, realized that out of the audit that took place last year, one of the issue was Lexington Fair Housing Coalition or organization, and the executive director of Lexington Fair Housing has offered to come and meet with the commission to talk about the work of the commission, and how Lexington Fair Housing works. It would be an informational exchange, and I think at some point when we're back in person, we want, or at least one of the meetings, we may want to do that as well, to receive that information, to get a better understanding around that in light of that. And maybe for the new individuals on the new commissioners, Terrence, we may want to give them in advance of that meeting a copy of the audit, so they'll be better informed and know what we're talking about when we have that session. Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Any additional new business?
One thing I wanted to bring up, for the past 2 years, both last year and this year, we refrained from, primarily due to COVID, I believe, utilizing our power to nominate individuals to the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame. We did so because the ceremonies normally associated with that would be irresponsible to be held during COVID. Last month, the Serve Kentucky Commission did their regular annual awards entirely virtually, and I thought it was done very, very well. I think that with everything going on, both in Kentucky and nationally, it calls for more inspiration and more examples for people to follow rather than less. And I think that we should move towards, once again, nominating people to the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame.
Thank you for that. Put that on the things we should be working towards. Any other new business, any other item anyone like to bring up?
I did want to share something I forgot to mention. Commissioner Rabbi reached out to me as a follow-up to our last commission meeting about the agency doing a menorah lighting ceremony. And we had a meeting and a conversation yesterday, and that is taking place. So we will post the video and share that across our social media and just get that out there. So we will be recording that next week, and then we will be sharing during later on in the season.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for the follow through. Anything else from anyone? Okay, hearing none, what I would like to do is have a motion that pursuant to KRS 61.8101F, that we go in executive session to discuss a personnel matter. Can I have a motion to that effect?
I would like to make a motion.
Okay.
We go into executive session. This is Commissioner Sarr.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Sarr. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Okay. Motion carries. We will now go into executive sessions, and only individuals, one of the commissioners and the executive director. So, Terrence,
just a moment. I'm moving people to waiting room.
Okay.
Let's see. Make sure I haven't forget anyone.